That evening, our house was filled with friends and relatives offering comfort as they bought the furniture my mother was selling. She having decided on the spot that we couldn't possibly continue to live in Chelsea in such disgrace. At one point, someone I didn't know but instantly disliked offered to buy my father's red leather chair, the throne from which he had controlled the radio dial on our floor model at Atwater, Kent, just as 40 years later, Archie would control the Bunker family's TV viewing from his living room armchair. As my mother and this scavenger agreed on a price, I was devastated. The loss of my father's chair was like losing him twice in the same week. And as if that were not enough, I would soon learn that my mother planned to take my younger sister to live with her and leave me with various relatives until my father got out of jail and the family could be reunited. I clutched all that remained of my summer dream, the unused roll of Norman M. Lear cloth, a piece of silent sadness, which I managed to keep with me well into my 30s, perhaps even my 40s. And my eyelids bit down hard on the tears I was fighting to hold back. At that point, someone, an uncle or cousin or neighbor, placed his hands on my shoulders, looked deep into my eyes, and announced with that soapy solemnity that so many adults use when they are offering gratuitous counsel to the young. Remember, Norman, you're the man in the house now. This had to be the moment when my awareness of the foolishness of the human condition was born. I was just past my 9th birthday. My father had been brought down before my eyes from a 10 to a 0. My mother and sister were about to disappear from my daily life. My own identity was no more than a thin bit of fabric in my fist, and I was looking up into the face of this fatuous asshole, telling me that I was the man of the house now. And then he added with a smarmy smile I wanted to rip from his face, "No, no, son, a man of the house doesn't cry." How could I not have developed a deep appreciation for the absurdities amid the gravity of our existence?
In case you want to, I'll leave that there for you. Well, that's incredible, and that grabbed me instantly, and it told me also that this is a master writer, a master author that we're reading. So, Norman, your father was Herman King Lear. He was King Lear. And so, which of the daughters were you? The ones who told him everything that King Lear wanted to hear, or Cordelia, the one who just said as much as a little bit of the truth? Were you any of them?
I was the 9-year-old who loved him dearly, and then the adult who saw clearly what he was and could not deal with it, I used to call him and think of him as a rascal. That was the word that I could live with. That he stole, that he lied, that he cheated, that he went to prison, that he was a rascal. Because he was also a charming man with a great deal of zest. He loved life. He ate, his fingers were always damp or wet with the food he was eating. And I had a hard time dealing with it. Look at me, I'm still having a hard time dealing with it. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing? You hear all the time people dying, and the last expression was something about mother or dad or whatever. It's no wonder. It's a hell of a role being a parent. And a kid of a parent.
Yeah, we keep processing it even when we're older. That experience, though, is this unspoken core around which a lot of your life and work revolved without you actually looking at it head on. So it must have been that crazy traumatic experience and growing up, that must have come out nonetheless in your work, I mean, in the comedy of it. What did you learn from that about comedy, tragedy?
I learned that there was, it's a very thin line between heartbreak and hilarity. A very thin line. It's being practiced, by the way, right now in a wonderful show called Transparent. Anybody familiar with Transparent on Amazon? It's about a 50-some-year-old guy with 3 grown children who has realized all his life, since he was 5 years of age, that he was really a girl, that he was had every instinct that was feminine. And it is in his mid-50s with 3 grown children in their own lives, and he's telling them for the first time that he has to become who he was born to be. It is the most amazing writing. Why did I bring that up?
Because you're mentioning like there's something on TV still that you think is worth seeing.
Well, there's a lot of, my God, the drama on television is just incredible today. I'm still very fond of a lot of the comedy, so especially South Park and Modern Family, and there's some great stuff.
You like the stuff that really pokes holes in. Can you poke a hole in a sacred cow?
That's what you're there for.
Whatever you do with them. Well, TV sitcoms were not.
Are we going to talk 10 minutes and then go to them?
I was going to say, well, you know what? I'm going to skip the thing about TV sitcoms and how you changed them, how they were different before you, and ask you about Fire Island. Because we're on Long Island. You spent summers on Fire Island with your family and the families of Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks and Larry Gelbart. You must have had incredible fun, and I'm just wondering, what kind of fun did you guys cook up?
We cooked it up well into our 40s, 50s, 60s also. We met on Fire Island. Carl Reiner and I had houses practically adjacent to one another. And we spent 2 summers there, and it was there that Mel and Carl started to do interviews, which resulted in the 2,000-Year-Old Man. But years later, I delight in telling you this. I had a friend who owned Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, and he called me one day and he said, Caesar's Palace, we have 2 houses, one in Palm Springs and one at La Costa, 5 bedrooms each, fully staffed. Anytime you went there, we keep them there for high rollers. I know you don't gamble, but it's there. It's not. They're not always used. I called him one day. I called his office. He said, call my office anytime. I called his office, and the house in Palm Springs was available. And I invited Mel and Carl, Dom DeLuise, and Larry Gelbart, and Lear. It's 5 families. And we went to Palm Springs and laughed our asses off for the entire weekend. And that, we continued that. We took the house in Palm Springs, the house in La Costa for 6 or 7 years, twice a year. There were weekends when we would get up on Saturday morning and we would we'd have breakfast in our bathrobes, and we would never get out of our bedwear for the weekend and just sit around, play games, and laugh.
That's terrific. I wish I had been there. I wish I could be a fly on the wall. It must have been incredible. I think we should turn this over to the audience. They're going to want to ask you questions and stories, B. Arthur, Archie, Carol Connor, anything. So let's start with some questions. Anybody want to ask? We have people with microphones on each side of the stage. So raise your hands and we'll get the first question. Okay, here we go. Right here, right? Anybody? Right here. The man in the blue. Pass down the microphone. Thank you.
Mr. Lear, where you're sitting across from this table from James Lipton, and the next blue card is being flipped, what question don't you want to hear, and what's the answer?
If Jim Lipton was sitting here and he asked me a question,
What card don't you want him to see flipped, and what question don't you want asked?
I can't imagine a question I wouldn't wish to be asked.
Yes.
Let's switch to Bernard Pivot.
Well, why don't you try?
What's your favorite? Let me refer to Bernard Pivot. What's your favorite curse word?
My favorite curse word? Fuck.
Who's next? By the way, nobody uses they talk about the N-word, but in one of these episodes, someone said nigger. What do you think about calling it the N-word now instead of saying the kinds of things that people say and letting people know that that's out there? Do you think one should? Yeah, I'm asking you.
And what do I think?
You think it's okay? You were very explicit in those days.
A lot of people think this is a what's the expression for
Politically correct.
Political what? Politically correct. Yeah, and I think that's political. You know, the word is out there. Certainly, the racism is out there.
Right.
We haven't, we haven't done the job with racism we've done with the gay and lesbian. I think about that a lot because it's miraculous what's happened in recent years in that situation, and I wish that were true of racism too, and hope to live to see it.
Yeah. Okay. Another question.
Yes, I'd like to know how you handled the controversial subjects that you used in All in the Family. I mean, I'm sure you had some backlash from the network.
Yeah, we had backlash from the network. I mean, it was a fight every week practically I want to be clear about something. There were no heroics. There were always little things. In the very first episode of All in the Family, Archie and Edith come home from church unexpectedly early because he hated the sermon. And they walk in, and Mike and Gloria, having realized that they had the house alone, which was rare, were rushing upstairs to make love. And hearing the door open, they came running down, and Archie gathered in an instant what the situation was, and he said, 11:10 of a Sunday morning. And they wanted that out. Now, I had already been through, you have to do a different episode to get on the air. I had made this episode 3 times for 2 networks. Same episode, same words, because my expression at the time was, you can't get wetter than wet. We're going to jump into the pool and get wet. And this script does that. Very slight storyline so that we can get 360 degrees of Archie Bunker, no surprises later. And they wanted that line out. They wanted that line out until 3 hours later earlier for California. It went on in New York. And before it went on, like an hour before it went on, I was still on the phone, and they were telling me it had to come out, and since I didn't take it out, they were able to take it out in New York, and that's the way it would air. And the last bit of the conversation, I said, well, if that happens and that's done in the air, I won't be here the next day. And I think the show was ending in New York. There was no cable, so I, couldn't see it in those days at the same time. And I learned that they left the line in. That's how insane it was, in my view. Now, that show could have existed without that line. I'm not here to tell you that line had to be in because it was monumental or because the sense of the show depended on it. There was only one thing that occurred to me. If I lost this simple little line, I would continue to lose forever. And it wouldn't be the show we intended. So that's why I said, well, take the line out, you won't find me here the next day. It doesn't feel, even as I repeat it now, such a Herculean battle. It was simple common sense. And when business is afraid of itself or being itself, all common sense is lost.